From the WATE.com Digital Center, answering your legal questions. This is Ask Isaacs. Now, here's Lori Tucker and attorney Greg Isaacs.
Everyone, good Wednesday afternoon to you. Glad you're with us today because we're talking about something that is in the news as we speak. And these are, Greg, the protest, riots, and where the First Amendment fits into all of this. And of course, we are talking about, major cities, major universities have been littered with protests and riots regarding the ongoing Israel-Palestine war. So let's talk about that conflict and why people are reacting the way they are and what's leading to these arrests.
Well, at different points in our history, we see massive organic protests that just seem to arise, during the Vietnam War. Martin Luther King, I Had a Dream, 1982, Central Park, an anti-nuclear energy weapons protest, 2017, women's rights. During COVID, Black Lives Matter permeated our cities and our streets. But now, in our college campuses, once again, you see the specter of protest, issues of free speech, and issues regarding riots and arrest.
But there have been encampments on some of these college campuses, and then those encampments have led to charges of breaking into buildings, and that's where these charges come from, not just simply the act of protesting.
And let's talk about that. There's kind of always 27 shades of gray between black and white, and let's begin at the beginning, because the First Amendment protects your right to free speech, freedom of exercise of religion. And these are the words of the Founding Fathers. These are the words of the Bigs. You have the right to peacefully assemble to address your grievances against the government. Peacefully assemble. So
Keywords.
What can you do, Lori?
How do you avoid getting arrested?
How do you avoid getting arrested? Government can regulate protest sit-ins by looking at their time, place, and manner of the protest. They are not allowed to modify, regulate, censor the content. All regulations, all enforcement has to be content neutral. So you look at the time, place, and manner of the protest, etc. But having said that, then you look at your absolute right, whether it's free speech, hate speech, speech that we find deplorable, that is typically protected speech. Now we know that you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, but you can express some pretty strong opinions.
When do you cross the line, though?
Well, this is different. This is not really what the problem that we've seen on the universities is not the content, although at Columbia and in UCLA, you saw some issues with content where Israeli students were being singled out, were not allowed to go to class with the protesters. Right. But basically, it's their conduct. And Tennessee defines a riot as 3 or more people engaging in conduct that is violent, tumultuous, places someone in grave danger. I love this words because it must be out of the 60s. Grave danger of substantial damage to property or serious bodily injury.
Well, and when you talk about UCLA, you had 2 different sides. So you have protest, counter-protest, and then everything else that ensued.
And so let's talk about this. So, no one is telling the protesters what to say or what not to say. They are not regulating their content.
But look at this video.
But this video shows basically what they're doing is it has morphed into illegal conduct. You can't hide or mask illegal conduct with the First Amendment. And so what they've done, the protesters entered into buildings at the University of Columbia, entrenched themselves. They built encampments. There were over 300 arrests, and you saw arrests for, and when you see the videos, disorderly conduct, trespass, burglary, vandalism. And those are things that are not protected speech.
And some common criticism we're hearing about is that these protests are fueled by the professionals, professional agitators, professional protesters who come in and stir things up and lead to laws broken and things like that.
And that's interesting because when I heard that, in preparing for the spot, I thought, well, to me, it shouldn't matter if you're a professional agitator or not. You have an absolute right to freedom of speech.
Good
You just
point.
can't use it as an excuse to break the law. But then I looked at Tennessee law. An aggravated riot, if you're paid or you come from out of state, that's an element of the offense of aggravated riot. So
Okay.
there are laws on the books, they're here in Tennessee, that you get punished for being a professional agitator, protester. But let's talk about, we talk about what protesters can do. Let's talk about what the universities can do, because it's really an interesting dichotomy or juxtaposition, because Columbia and UCLA literally lost control of their campuses.
They really did. And just today, Columbia's president said, I regret calling the police for that earlier incident.
Well, that's interesting, because Texas and Florida are on the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Texas, as soon as they started to build an encampment, the Texas Highway Patrol, National Guard swooped in, arrested approximately 40 to 50 people. The encampments were shut down. Florida issued what is the strongest statement that I've seen in this. When their protests started, they arrested 9 people immediately. I mean, they don't even start.
Florida said we're not treating them like children.
It says the University of Florida is not a daycare. We do not treat protesters like children.
Yeah.
And if you get caught, you're going to be suspended for 3 years, a no trespass order. So think about this: if you're about to graduate,
So
you're an
academically,
employee, so
huge.
there is a big price to pay. But here's the thing: when you think about this, time, place, and manner can always be regulated, but you don't have the right to use the First Amendment to break the law.
Now, let's go back to that point about academics, the consequences there. Is this something that schools are allowed to do, this system of punishment, when this has nothing to do with their academics? It has more to do with
What is? Because
what they feel is their civil responsibility?
Here at the University of Tennessee, we have a student handbook, Hill Topics, and it sets forth the rules and regulations and conduct that you must govern yourself if you're a student at the University of Tennessee. Each and every university has those codes of conduct, those rules of conduct, and they're very strong and they're very commonsensical. So not only do you have the requirement of complying with state law, but you have to comply with the policies and the guidelines of a particular academic institution.
And you have to wonder if some of these students don't fully understand that, as some were being carried away. They were saying, but I'm a student here. I'm a student here.
Right. And again, the student can use free speech.
Yeah.
You can't barricade yourself in a building and disrupt the orderly administration of academia. So that's where this is crossing the line. So you could protest, you can't riot. You can express you can peacefully assemble and express your views, no matter how distasteful. And one thing, I think is interesting, at the heart of this battle, it's not an issue of whether you're pro-Palestinian, you're pro-Gaza, you're pro-Israel. This is an issue of protesters that are disrupting campuses and are breaking the law.
Why do you think some schools allow the encampments to go on and on and on?
Wow,
What is your
guess,
opinion on that?
I'll harken back to what Florida said, and I hate to agree with anything that comes out of Florida or says, but I think it's like parents. Why do you let the students get away with it? It got worse and it got worse and it escalated when you allow people, when you patronize them, allow them to break the law. But in Texas and Florida, I mean, as soon as the first encampment started going up, they were disorderly, they were disrespectful. You saw people come in very firmly and aggressively and react. Now think about this. Just because you call yourself a protester gives you no we talked about this during Black Lives Matter. That doesn't give you the right to march down the street, deface buildings, break windows. When somebody wins the Super Bowl, you don't have the right to loot and pillage. And these are what's sad when you look at a First Amendment analysis, when you have protests of this nature that are organic and they rise up. They're typically very important societal and social issues that people want redressed. And that's why our founding fathers said you had the absolute right to peacefully assemble
Peacefully.
and petition the government to redress your grievances and your wrongs. You don't have the right to shut down highways, academic institutions, places where people work.
And
So
make people on campus feel unsafe.
and make people feel unsafe.
So before we let you go, let's go over what some of these people who were arrested can face. You talked about academics, that could be suspended for a while. So what criminally, what are they
criminally,
looking
typically
at?
disorderly conduct is a misdemeanor offense, but when you talk about vandalism, that's value driven. If you did thousands of dollars in damage to one of the Columbia buildings, you could be responsible for that. It could be a felony. Burglary is a felony. But then again, you have a criminal offense on your record. So, very interesting. Thankfully, nobody has been hurt. But just remember, the government can't tell you what to say, but they can tell you how to say it.
There you go. Let's
Okay.
talk more at 5:30.
Let's do.
Thanks for being with us.